All right, my name is Sylvia Udall-Willett, and I am really proud of the Udall because that is a pioneer name, especially an Arizona pioneer name. Wilford Woodruff sent my ancestors, David Udall and his brother, down to Arizona to settle in Indian territory down there, and I have lots of really good stories about that as well. But today, the thing that particularly stands out is a story of one of my ancestors from England named Jane, and she was a teenage girl, about 15. The missionaries taught her family the gospel, and they joined the church. But Jane, the desire of her heart was to come to America more than anything else. She prayed and prayed to be able to come to be with the saints here in the United States. And so her uncle came to visit one Christmas, and he said, I've got enough money to buy a passage for myself and one of your children to bring to Zion, to be with the saints in Zion. And Jane said, please let me go. This is the answer to my prayer. And can you imagine, as parents, to have your teenage daughter say, I want to leave and go and cross the ocean and a continent and be in a strange land, and just to let her go? And at first, Jane's parents were like, no, you cannot do that. It's too far, and we can't let you go. But as she prayed with her whole heart, they came to be softened and realized it was the right thing. So Jane prepared, and she crossed, she left from Liverpool. She traveled to Liverpool and took a boat across the Atlantic, and then a train into St. Louis, I believe, wherever the train let them off, where they would start the trek west, because I think the saints had already left Nauvoo at that time. And she said, as she got off that train, she said, I never want to be on a train again, because I guess it was like a really bumpy ride. But little did she know that she was going from that comfort of a train to a wagon. And so she crossed the prairie, and as she got closer and closer to the Salt Lake Valley, she realized that she knew not a soul. And I read this, I'm not sure where her uncle was at this point, but as she got into Salt Lake, she didn't know anybody. So she prayed, and she said, please let the first person that comes up to talk to me as we arrive in the Salt Lake Valley, I will know that is who I'm supposed to go live with. Because at that point, the saints were used to taking the immigrants into their homes. As they arrived in the valley, they would just take them in. And as she arrived in Salt Lake, this woman came up to her and said, hi, and introduced herself, and Jane said, I knew that's where I was supposed to go, and the Lord answered her prayers. And she went on to, marry in the temple and have a great life there in the Salt Lake Valley. But that's one of the stories that stood out to me, particularly because of her great faith as a young teenage girl, to have that kind of faith, to leave her family and come to a strange land, and just to know that that was the right thing. So that's my story.
Well, I've had very good luck using Family Search and learning more about my family history. I've always known that I was Polish on my dad's side, but through Family Search, I discovered my Scottish roots. And an interesting story that I've got one line that was loyal to the British during the Revolutionary War. And after the war, they went to Canada, and 100 years later is when they came back to the U.S. And I was able to trace my family back through Family Search on that one line that had been a roadblock for so long. I love Family Search, and I love doing my family history and learning more about myself.
Hi, my name is Justin Beasley. I'm in the University City Ward. One experience that I've had while doing my family history was receiving some letters that my mom had gathered and put together. As I started to comb through and read the letters, I was fascinated to learn about the stories of my ancestors. I particularly found it interesting, thinking that I was one of the first generations in my family to have joined the church, to read back over old letters and realize that I did have some heritage that had Mormon ancestry that was actually from the Carolinas. Despite having grown up on the West Coast and not knowing that we had any ties to this region of the country, I stumbled across references to great aunts and uncles that had lived here before me, and it really inspired me to go out and learn more about my history so that I could make connections with these men and women.
Well, the first time that I got interested in family history, I was invited out to San Francisco to visit my uncle and my grandmother on my father's side. And I didn't know anything about that particular side of my family. My father died when I was 13, and my mother just wasn't much help. So when I went out there, my uncle filled me in on what he remembered about his family, and then he told me that his grandfather's name was Mosman Chrissy Oviatt. And being connected with that name, I started thinking about him all the time, and so I started doing all kinds of research. But I finally, after 10 years of researching him and researching Oviatts and everything, I finally found his little brother, who had died at the age of 18 months. And once I found him, that was when I knew that that was what I was looking for. And so I was able to have him sealed along with some others to their parents, and down at the Atlanta Temple back in the 80s. And so I've been working on genealogy ever since, and it has just been so wonderful and so fulfilling in my life.